But a big reason why they won that Maryland game was not just the players. Remember last week, I talked about Indiana's crowd. Indiana's home crowd has been an issue. Definitely. They've not had a lot of fans. Remember how embarrassing that was? There was barely any fans in the stadium. Well, Curt Cignetti is absolutely thrilled with what he saw, the response from the Indiana fans, despite the weather. He said on Twitter, love the crowd, like our team, let's do better. And look at that crowd. There's a few empty seats. There's a few empty seats on the top right and the top left over here, but almost all of the seats were filled for this game. So the stadium holds 52,000 people, and I think there was reported close to 49,000. So it was almost full capacity with bad weather. And Indiana not being a football school and their fans don't care about the team. Well, they care now because Curt Cignetti, he's making them care. He's making them want to show up because there's high-quality football, number one. And plus, Curt Cignetti, he did a full email to the student body last week. After I did the live stream last week talking about previewing the Maryland game, Curt Cignetti did an email to the entire student body telling them that you need to show up. You need to show up and show out for this game. Like, don't even study. Like, I want you to study, but do not even study. Do not even go to a party or tailgate, all that kind of stuff. We need you in the stadium helping our team out. And they did. They showed out. It was a great crowd for Indiana. And I think that if Indiana can continue to win, there might be some sellouts in the future this season. Nebraska's coming up down the road. If that game's a sellout, that's going to help out Indiana's atmosphere. And you also have Michigan on the schedule at home as well. Purdue, even though Purdue hasn't looked all that good, still Indiana's rival. Indiana struggled with Purdue the past few seasons. That crowd needs to help out Indiana's players. They need to help out, just the entire atmosphere, the vibe. Get the players juiced up because when you have a loud crowd, even maybe when you're not playing all that well, it can rattle the other team. And Indiana has been known as an easy place to play for a long time, a lot of their history, because a lot of times either their fans have nothing to cheer about because they're losing, or their fans don't even show up at all. And there's a lot of empty seats. That's not a good home environment. But Indiana's home environment is improving brick by brick, piece by piece, every single game. Every single game that Indiana has played this season, there have been more fans in the stadium. It is building. It is growing. And that's what winning does. When you win and you have success, even if Indiana is a basketball school, it does not matter. The fans are going to show up for Indiana football if you give them a reason to. If you give them a reason. I mean, how did all the best teams in college football build their stadiums to the point where they have 100,000 fans? People wanted to go. People wanted to be at the games because they care about the team. Alabama, Texas A&M, all these big teams. Indiana football, yeah, they got a small stadium, but it's because there's never been any interest for them to build a bigger stadium. Why build a 80,000, fan stadium capacity when there's no one there showing up? If Indiana football, I'm not saying they're ever going to build the stadium and make it huge or anything, but I mean, if you continue to have success, and this is what Curt Cignetti is trying to do at Indiana, if you continue to have success, the people will come. They're not going to want to come for terrible football. Nebraska is a unique situation. I've said this tons of times. Nebraska is a unique situation. And the fact that their fans will show up no matter what. They also have a history too. Tom Osborne built that program. All those national championships that he had. And yeah, people say there's not much else to do in Nebraska, but there's not a lot else to do in some other states too, that there's not a lot of great college football being played and there's not a lot of fans. Nebraska is a unique situation. The fans in that state care about the team and the history that they had, and they want Nebraska to get back there. And that's why they still show up. They still care. They have been selling out that place for 50 years. It is insane. They have over 400 sellouts in a row. I mean, there's been a few games where they've gotten close to not selling it out, and they've made sure it's sold out. That's how dedicated Nebraska fans are. And once they start winning again, they're going to keep selling it out. But that's the thing with Indiana. They just don't have that fan interest like Nebraska does. Indiana basketball does. Even when they're horrible, they still sell out. Even when they're bad, they still have fans showing up. It just, unfortunately, does not happen for Indiana football, but I do think it's going to happen in the future if Curt Cignetti stays with this program for the long haul. I mean, I know it's very early to talk about extension, and I'm not going to get into that here because we're going to be talking about that probably later in the season, have its own segment. But Indiana needs to hold on to Curt Cignetti, and if he continues to deliver with the way that he has delivered so far, the fans are going to show up. In that environment, I mean, it's not going to be Penn State. It's not going to be Ohio State. It's not going to be Michigan. And I'm never going to expect it to be as good as those teams. Those teams have fantastic fan bases, a big stadium, loud atmospheres. Even though some people say wine and cheese on some of those, some people even said that about Indiana, like a lot of wine and cheese fans. Me and Will and D talked about wine and cheese fans on my YouTube channel, Only Talk Sports, a few days ago. I don't like the wine and cheese fans. Oh, you can't stand up. Like, come on. Like, you're at a football game. You're supposed to be loud. You're supposed to be standing up. And Indiana, like when I watch them on TV in football, I normally don't hear the crowd. I don't. Like, they're usually like an afterthought. Like, a lot of times you can almost hear the music over the fans. Like, you can hear what's playing in the background over the fans clearly. Well, I was watching this game on TV, Indiana playing Maryland this past Saturday, and I heard the crowd. It, again, wasn't one of the best in college football. It wasn't like Alabama when they played Georgia. That crowd was nuts. But right here, Indiana's crowd made a big impact in this game. Absolutely, they did. And it's going to continue in the future if they keep winning. Curt Cignetti stays. It's a big deal. Absolutely. Jeff says, howdy, Only Talk Sports. I'm here. Appreciate that, Jeff. G Bama boy. Appreciate you for stopping by. Roll Tide, y'all. Absolutely. Big win for the Crimson Tide over Georgia, but Indiana getting a big win over Maryland, and their crowd was a big reason why. I mean, I'm not saying Maryland was like uber rattled by the crowd. I'm not going to go out there and say that Indiana's crowd is now one of the most formidable in college football, but it's definitely not a weak link, especially in this game. It's not a weak link anymore. It's been a weak link for a long time, but that's not going to be an issue. That's not going to be a problem for Indiana in the future if Curt Cignetti continues to have them win. I mean, this crowd was really solid for Indiana football. And I'm excited to see it. I'm absolutely excited to see it. I like seeing teams that don't normally have success and teams that don't normally have fan interest get fan interest. Yeah, you don't really want bandwagon fans. You don't want fans that are like, oh, I never cared about that team when they're losing, and now that they're winning, they do care. You want people that in the background, like they love Indiana. They like Indiana a lot. It's hard to support a team when they're trash. I get it. It's 110% okay. Very hard to support a team that's no good. But you don't have any reason to not support this team if you are in the state of Indiana. And I know you might even be a Notre Dame fan throughout history. Like, you like Indiana basketball, you like Notre Dame football. I get that, but you have no reason not to support this team. And what's so awesome about Curt Cignetti is how he is like he's thanking the fan base. He's responding. He even emailed the entire student body after the game saying thank you. Now go study. Made sure to throw that in there. Now you got to go study. But he thanked them for this because of the fact that that's what he wants to see. I think that might keep Cignetti in Indiana longer, maybe for the rest of his career, if you just continue to see this forward momentum. You don't want it to stall. You don't want to be like, well, we did all we could do in Indiana. We tried to build it as much as we could, but you know what? The fans just didn't really care. Didn't really happen. We just couldn't really build this thing. We did the best we could, but it's done. Like, we maxed it out. You don't want that. Indiana, continue to improve. Like he said, let's do better. That Maryland game, that's not even the best that Cignetti wants to see. That's not even the best that I think Indiana is even capable of based on what we've seen. Indiana had a lot of mistakes against Maryland, still comfortably beat them. They absolutely, could have won by more, but it was a comfortable win. And it's just impressive that you're seeing Indiana in all aspects get better and better. The crowd is getting better. The team's getting better. Curt Cignetti's trying to do everything he can to get better. But the crowd getting better is so important because that's a byproduct of winning. That's going to continue to happen week by week until you start seeing sellouts, even not against big opponents. Like, it will be impressive for Indiana to have sellouts against Nebraska and Michigan later on down the season. That will be impressive. Hope that happens. It should happen, especially if Indiana's still doing very well at that point. But you want to start seeing, like next year, Indiana playing a bad team in the non-conference. That's a sellout. That's what you want to see. It's going to take a long time maybe for Indiana to get to that point, but that's how you build the fan interest. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but I think Indiana's getting there because I was not expecting the fans to be this good with the amount of rain and bad weather that Indiana had with Hurricane Helene. And again, prayers to everybody dealing with that. It is a horrific situation. But despite the weather and the adversity, Indiana overcame and won this game, and the crowd was a big deal. And Curt Cignetti, very grateful for it. And that is such a nice thing to see.